carve out for the auto sector, a break for Mexico. Could more breaks be on the way for Canada in the trade war? This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
All the news you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Days into the trade war with the United States, there are more developments to tell you about on the tariff front. Just moments ago, in a post on social media, U.S. President Donald Trump said he is pausing all tariffs on Mexico until April 2nd on any goods that fall under CUSMA. But there's no word on whether the same pause applies to Canada. Yesterday, the Trump administration announced a pause on tariffs on the products of the big three automakers. That, too, is a pause of 30 days. The auto sector is Ontario's most important industry and Canada's most important manufacturing industry. But news of a 30-day pause isn't being met with much enthusiasm from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who was back on Fox News and said the 30-day break changes nothing from his perspective.
We will be relentless. When our country's under attack, our province is under attack, we will be relentless and we will not stop. This is survival mode for Canada. And, it's a shame he's actually doing this to his largest trading partner. It's unacceptable. I can tell you what's going to happen, Brett. He ran on creating jobs, on bringing costs down. I can assure you, assembly lines will shut down. You can't pop up auto plants overnight. People are going to lose their jobs. Inflation's going to happen. The market's taking a tumble. It recovered a little bit, still down $2 trillion. These are people's pensions. For what reason? To attack your friends?
Today, during an appearance on CNN, Premier Ford said he would impose a 25% export tax on all electricity exports to the United States from Ontario. Ford said he plans to do that on Monday. When asked by American news reporters what was behind the decision to grant the delay to the auto sector, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Donald Trump expects the big three to shift their production to the United States.
One, on the reprieve that is being granted to these three automakers for 1 month on the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. How did the president settle on 1 month?
The reciprocal tariffs will go into effect on April 2nd, and he feels strongly about that no matter what, no exemption, so that's where the 1 month comes from.
Does he expect them to be able to shift production within a month?
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
At a news event in Ottawa today at a child care center, Prime Minister Trudeau recounted the phone call that he had with President Trump yesterday. He was asked about the call by a member of the press gallery.
I wonder if you can describe the tone, the tenor, the scope. I understand some profanity emerged in that call. Maybe you can explain the context in which that happened. Can you give us some color on that phone?
I can confirm that it was a colorful call. And it was also a very substantive call. We talked about a range of issues. Of course, primarily the trade war that they have chosen to unjustly launch on Canada. But there is also a recognition that our two countries are deeply interwoven, not just in our economy, but in our people-to-people ties and our history. And we should be able to continue to do big things together as we have over many years in the past, first and foremost by negotiating and signing an extraordinarily successful USMCA CUSMA deal, but that there's more to do, and we committed to continue to work together constructively.
Mr. Trudeau was then asked if he had any idea what Donald Trump is doing.
I'm not going to get into it too much because there are ongoing conversations and we don't yet have anything to officially announce. But I will say the focus we have right now is on reducing the impacts of the tariffs. I can confirm that we will continue to be in a trade war that was launched by the United States for the foreseeable future. So Canadians should continue to buy Canadian, continue to stand up for each other. But we are trying to reduce the areas and the impact that these tariffs that the Americans are bringing in will have on Canadian workers.
It was a very disappointed Alberta Premier meeting with news reporters in Medicine Hat. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who was accused by some of not being part of Team Canada, criticized the Trump administration as she announced her government's own response plan.
Let there be no mistake. As independent as we are, Albertans are strong and loyal Canadians. Thousands of Albertans have lost their lives fighting alongside our fellow Canadians to secure and protect our freedoms and our country. And we will not cast those freedoms and loyalties aside in response to the threat of economic pressure from a foreign government, even an historically friendly one. Albertans will decide our own destiny, free of coercion from any government. So today I'm announcing the following measures in response to the actions of the U.S. President. First, I've directed my cabinet to alter our procurement practices to ensure the government of Alberta, along with our agencies, school boards, crown corporations, and all Alberta municipalities, purchase all needed goods and services from Alberta companies, from Canadian companies, and from countries with which Canada has a free trade agreement that is being honored.
After 2 days of heavy selling on the stock markets on Monday and Tuesday, the markets rebounded somewhat yesterday, but right now, markets are deep in the red. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 445 points right now. The NASDAQ, not much better. The tech-heavy NASDAQ down 383 points. Our own TSX main index down better than 200 points, 222 points right now, but the Canadian dollar is up on the day and actually back above 70 cents US. It is up 25 basis points on the day and last traded at 70.03 cents US. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Please, our friend on the right side of things, Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, back with us on a Thursday. How are you this week?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hey, don't you write for The Spectator every now and then out of the UK?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Tell us about The Spectator. Tell us just a little bit about that. I don't know much about it myself.
Well, let's see. It's one of the oldest publications still in existence. I believe it was started in the 1820s or 1830s. I don't have the exact date sitting in front of me. Reliably conservative publication in the UK. Many great writers have been there. Some of their editors, for example, one of their main editors was Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So it has always been a reliably conservative publication. It has grown over the years very briefly to include North America as part of their design. They have an American edition. They have an Australian edition. And what we will probably be talking about as a guest is Ben Domenech, who actually wrote or had an interview with Donald Trump on there. Ben is actually quite well known in the United States for people. He's actually the husband of Meghan McCain, the daughter of John McCain.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. Well, thank you for that background. And that's a very nice segue, because The Spectator did do an interview with Donald Trump and asked him for his thoughts on Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader in Canada. And Donald Trump doesn't think much of Pierre Poilievre because he said Pierre Poilievre's not a MAGA guy. We have the audio. Right. Let's listen here.
Well, I think his biggest problem is he's not a MAGA guy, you know? I mean, he's really not. He's not a Trump guy at all.
He's more of a throwback Republican.
He's different.
Yeah.
Making a big mistake. They all make that mistake, you know. They think they're going to be the tough guy and they're going to knock out Trump.
Yeah.
And they end up getting the hell beat out of him. So I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you, Pierre. I just don't know. I don't like what he's saying about me. It's just not positive about me.
Not a MAGA guy, not positive about me. Maybe if you're Pierre Poilievre, that's music to your ears, a disappointment to liberals maybe. What do you think about it?
No, it is music to his ears. That's exactly what he wants to hear, not because he's necessarily out there to show the divisions between himself and Donald Trump, but that's what I and others have been saying for years now, Rob, is that basically that Poilievre and Trump are not two sides of the same political and ideological coin. And while some people scream that, they're just saying it because they're partisan, no. The reason is because they're not the same. And it has been shown time and time again, based on the policies, ideas, and things that they espouse. Both of them are very, very different. So no, what we are actually seeing is, and as I think I wrote, and I'm not sitting in front of my my post on X, this will now be a primary source going forward. It really will, Rob, because the President of the United States has directly said that conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is not the same as him. And I'm laughing about it, but it's so obvious that hopefully, based on the fact that Trump has said it, more people will pay attention to it. I mean, obviously, Trump's critics, Poilievre's critics, and others won't pay a lick of attention to it, but they should, because in that little clip that you actually aired, that gives enough indication that the two men are different. It doesn't mean they can't work together, and it doesn't mean that they can't build a political bridge to improve their two countries if Poilievre becomes prime minister, which hopefully he will sometime later this year. But that actually does show that, unsurprisingly, they don't march in lockstep. But we all knew that already. It's just some people wanted to spin it in a different way.
Okay. How would you say they're different?
I don't see a ton of similarities, to be perfectly honest. They do use, obviously, some populist language and lines in their comments, their rhetoric, their videos, interviews that they have. But if you look at it really, Pierre Poilievre is a modern small C conservative. He truly is. You know, he believes in individual rights and freedom, lower taxes, smaller government. He doesn't believe in things like tariffs, which he's opposed. He has actually supported Ukraine a fair bit over the years. Again, there's this mythology that he never did. It's not true. I mean, I pulled in quotes, others have too. And even more recently, he's taking a different stance. That's certainly different than the way Donald Trump is dealing with things right now in the Russia-Ukraine war. Poilievre also as well has I believe, has always had a greater respect for the free market and for the ideologies of that nature than Donald Trump has. It doesn't mean Donald Trump's opposed to the free market. He's not. It doesn't mean he's opposed to capitalism and conservatism. He's not. But he looks at things very, very differently. Trump looks more towards things like economic nationalism and other aspects, whereas Pierre Poilievre, I'd like somebody to point out to me, and I've known him for more than 20 years, one time that he's actually ever opposed basic concepts like free markets, trade liberalization, and otherwise. They're just very different.
Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about the person set to become, according to most pundits, Prime Minister of Canada as soon as next week, Mark Carney.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Back with Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who is going to be glued to the TV on Sunday watching the Liberal Leadership Convention, right? You're looking forward to the. You're looking forward to the Jean. You're looking forward to the Jean Chrétien speech, right? You're looking forward to the big Jean Chrétien speech, I'm sure.
I can't wait. Can't wait.
You've got your PVR set already. I know you do, Michael Taube. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark Carney is already getting briefings about tariff strategy. He has security details. So, I mean, it would seem that there's not much anticipation about the outcome. That it seems to be a foregone conclusion now that Mark Carney is going to become the Liberal leader and the Prime Minister. I mean, you've watched him for many years. What do you think, based on what you know about him?
Well, you and I have talked about it. I don't think very much of him, and I quite frankly don't think it's going to be much of an improvement of what we've seen. The only difference is, this is Carney is a more intelligent version of the things that Justin Trudeau has represented the past decade, which have been disastrous and destroyed our economy and destroyed our country. So if you want more of the same, but maybe with a slightly different style and different messaging, that's what you're going to get with Mark Carney. I mean, you and I have talked about it. This is a guy who continually claims that he's a political outsider. And it's true. He has no political experience. He's never run for a seat for parliament, which obviously means he's never held it. And he doesn't know anything about the day-to-day operations of politics. He's never led a political party, never been in a position to. And he somehow thinks that his experience as an economist, the former Bank of Canada governor, the former Bank of England governor can all be transferred into politics, which is madness because politics, like all disciplines, is different. And there are different machinations and aspects to it that you need to get your feet wet to some degree to fully understand or even partially understand. The fact that basically he feels, that being Mark Carney, that he can just sort of waltz into this with no political experience and lead a country, it's crazy. But I mean, again, to be fair, the Liberals are going to make that decision, or a very small group of them compared to the size of the country. They're going to appoint him. He's not being elected. And in terms of his policies and ideas, again, we've gone through a lot of them, but there's really not that much help. His ideology is very much left of center. You know, he supports environmental policies like net zero climate solutions, which have largely been discredited, building a sustainable world economy, which no one actually has any idea on. There are various models that exist. All of them are illogical if you actually go and look at them. He wants to tackle wealth inequality because, you know, why should we have a system or a country where you can actually earn a living, where you can actually make money, succeed? But no, let's just diversify, ensure that people can't keep more of what they earn. Horrifying policies. He's even declared a number of years ago, people may remember during the Occupy Wall Street protests, he actually said that he felt that the whole protests were entirely constructive. That's a direct quote. This is from an economist, a person who looks at finances. He was criticized. He was basically supporting the people who criticize people like him. I mean, it's just, and there's more. There's so much more. But basically, he's just been involved in so many either center-left or far-left ideas. He is completely out of touch with reality. And the fact that he and every other Liberal now have suddenly, you know, seen the light and are now opposed to Trudeau's carbon tax when not a peep came out of any of them, and certainly Mark Carney, the private citizen, didn't say much against it either. It just shows that obviously this is just hypocritical. And if Canadians are going to be fooled by the same Liberal Party, the same government caucus, other than the person who's coming in, who really doesn't think all that differently than they do, I mean, if that veneer actually appeals to people when the old veneer clearly did not, it doesn't say much about the voting public, I'm afraid.
Well, I think it's going to be a fascinating 5 or 6 weeks ahead. You know, the conclusion on Sunday, and then maybe an election call soon thereafter, and into the campaign, and we'll see how it turns out. Thank you for today. We look forward to your insight throughout it all. Yeah, Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio. The Newsday Panel.
Yep, time for the Newsday Panel. Jordan Paquette is with us today, Senior Consultant, Blue Sky Strategy Group. Welcome back. Good to hear from you today, Jordan.
Thanks, Rob.
You're sounding better than the last time I heard from you. You're sounding a lot better than the last time. Yeah, that's good. That's
better,
good.
Yeah, got my voice back finally.
Yeah, that's good. Cam Holmstrom is here, the principal at Nipaway Strategies. How are you, Cam?
Good as one can be in these days, Rob.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's been a wild and crazy week, and it should be quite a weekend for political junkies with the conclusion of the Liberal leadership race on Sunday. Who do you think is going to win, Cam?
I'll be stunned at this point if it's not Mark Carney. I don't see how it isn't at this point. The only thing I could see throwing a monkey wrench into things is the issues they've been having with actually getting votes tallied. You know, it was interesting. Just last week, I was down at the post office here locally, sending off a couple checks to go out in the mail, and it just so happened that the person next to me at the wicket next to me was trying to mail in his ballot for the Liberal leadership, and was talking just openly about all the issues they've been having trying to get their vote to count. So I'm kind of curious to see what the turnout's going to be because of that. Because you know what, the fact of the matter is that they're trying to protect and make sure it's going to be a safe vote. But I wonder if they went out, if they made it too hard, and how many people are just going to walk away. How many of those 400,000 free members just decide, I'm not going to bother?
Well, it's interesting. The latest number from the Liberal Party, Jordan, is 115,000 people have voted, which it seems to me a little bit on the low side. It's a lot lower than the number of votes in the last leadership race for the Conservative Party, which was more than 400,000. It does make you wonder, about turnout, about problems, and if Mark Carney's going to win on Sunday, how many Liberal supporters are actually going to decide who will be the next prime minister, really, in the end, if this number holds, and you think about it that way.
Right. I mean, it's much more like a coronation process. So I don't think the Liberals are going to have anything that will disrupt this weekend's coronation by any means. But you're right, Rob. Comparing it to the Conservative members, I mean, the Conservatives had, I think, 675 eligible to vote, 675,000. And they were a governing party. Liberals are a governing party. They're literally selecting the next prime minister. You don't have to pay to join the party. You just have to sign a form. So anybody can go out and do that. And now, we're only at 100 and some thousand. Now, I expect it to tick up. In a leadership race, you're never going to get 100% turnout or even close to it.
No.
It's kind of going to be more like a general election, but still, it's still, it would be concerning. This is supposed to be the Liberals' big renewal, with Justin Trudeau stepping aside. This is supposed to be putting life back into them across the country, and they're going to have some explaining to do with such a low turnout for this.
Okay, let me ask you about something else. There's a very biting editorial about Mark Carney in the Globe and Mail today. That is encouraging Mark Carney to disclose his financial assets before a federal election, even before he becomes prime minister. The way it works right now, he wouldn't have to do that for another 60 days after assuming office. And the Globe and Mail is saying that's just not good enough. That a new prime minister needs to earn the trust, and his refusal to do so is not meeting that standard. Well, what is your opinion, Cam, on his refusal to disclose his financial assets?
You know what? Given the circumstances and the timing of this, it's not my biggest concern, but eventually he's going to have to answer the question. I'll put it at that. Because to my mind, this whole process has been so truncated and so fast. I can imagine what it would take to get all that together for that to be done. It's not like you just have to sign a couple of forms to get your security clearance, and Pierre Poilievre hasn't been able to bring himself to do that for 2 years. So, but you know what? The fact of the matter is that I'll applaud the Globe and Mail for their consistency, because they've chided both Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney. So good on them for being consistent. But is it at the top of my list right now? Not right now, just because of the timing involved, but also for the fact that the man has been the governor of two national banks over time, right? The Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. And the disclosures you have to do in order to do those kinds of jobs are pretty significant when it comes to any potential conflicts of interest. And he cleared those bars with no problem. So it's not like he's never done this. So I would hope he would get this done sooner than later and clear the question out of the way, like he has, ironically, with his security clearance, and also renouncing his other citizenships, which Andrew Scheer never could be brought to do. So, hey, you know what? He wins on some callings, he loses on others.
Okay. What do you think about his refusal to disclose his financial assets already, Jordan?
So as I was saying last week on different programs, I think this one too, this is going to be Mark Carney's Achilles heel going forward. If he's going to try and dance around this issue, it's not like just disclosing things to get a job at the Bank of Canada. All this wealth that he was amassing was after he left the banks. And we've already seen he's gotten into some trouble now with trying to rewrite history on his role in Brookfield and moving that to the States. How many shares does he still have in that company? How many shares does he have in other companies? Obviously he's going to have to put all these in blind trusts, but he's out there right now stating policies, and he will be the prime minister in a matter of days at this point. So Canadians are going to have a right to know what his financial situation is and where his assets are tied up, because if he's out there making policy on behalf of Canadians, we've already seen what he did before, moving the headquarters to the U.S. when he had something to do about it. The Canadians have the right to ask a question Who's he going to be looking out for? And rightly or wrongly, it's probably all above board. But the fact that he's not disclosing it, the fact that he's not putting it out there, the fact that he's delaying this for so long, it's only going to hurt him. In the long run, because Canadians are just going to have more.
It's about appearances. It's about perception. Right. Perception is reality in politics more than reality is in politics, right? Okay, we'll stop here. Back with Jordan Piquette from Blue Sky Strategy Group. From Nipaway Strategies, Cam Holmstrom is here as well. What do you think about the admission, Cam, from Melanie Joly that she briefed Mark Carney on the tariff issue? Mark Carney is still, for all intents and purposes, just a candidate for a party leadership. It makes you want, were other candidates offered the same information? Some will say this must be evidence the fix is in. The fix is in, Cam. What do you think?
If that's what people want to see, that's what they'll want to see. And I could show them a baked potato and they think the same thing, Rob. So I'm not worrying about that. Let's just be real. Mark Carney has the kind of experience and background with his work with the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England that, yeah, you know what? You might want him to be in on the loop, right? If you weren't running or not, you probably want his advice on a couple of things. And honestly, I think the circle on who's being briefed on this is pretty wide at this point, right? Between the premiers, between the cabinet, between the committee that's supporting all of this as well, with all the different business, labor, indigenous leaders across the country, the circle's already pretty wide at this point. Like if you're briefing Jean Charest at this point, and you're briefing Arlene Dickinson at this point, why wouldn't you also brief Mark Carney?
Really? I don't know if I see it quite that way. Especially with Parliament prorogued. Like Arlene Dickinson? Are there any other people from television that should get a briefing on the tariff strategy? I mean, come on.
I'm not saying because she's on television. I'm saying because she's the business person. My point is, the circle is pretty wide at this point. It hasn't been confined to cabinet.
All right. What do you think, Jordan? What do you think?
I think it shows that Carney is obviously just going to be a continuation of the Trudeau government. I mean, he's been their top economic advisor for the last number of years, so I think he's been part of these briefings. He's been one briefing cabinet on economic policy for the last number of years, and that same policy that he's now trying to run away from. Look, in a similar vein of Cam, I don't necessarily think it is scandalous that if the foreign affairs minister was having a conversation with somebody supporting and telling her. Quite a bit different though if she did have officials there and they kind of had it more as an official briefing. That kind of, I think, gives people perhaps pause, especially the other candidates, to at least say, hey, maybe we could get some similar treatment here, or perhaps they could brief the opposition leaders. To your point, Rob, it is a minority parliament that is shut down right now. So I mean, if he's receiving information that isn't public or that isn't out there accessible to other people, then that for sure is an issue. But as I mentioned, if this is just the two of them having a conversation, bringing them up to speed, then whatever. I mean, he's been the one that's been briefing cabinet on economic policy for a while.
All right.
I would just point out, all that's being said, assuming that the leaders of the opposition, that the other candidates and such aren't being briefed. And you know what? None of them have come out and complained and said, hey, I'm not getting briefed. So I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say they're all getting briefed.
Well, everybody needs to be briefed every hour the way this thing is going.
It's crazy. The briefing gets stale.
Yeah, okay. Let me ask you this. Okay, I'm sure we would all agree the Liberal leadership race is a rather genteel affair, right?
Yeah.
They all like each other, I guess, right? It's... Trump is the bad guy. We're the Liberals. We're the good guys. Pierre Poilievre is the bad guy. We're the Liberals. We're the good guys. That's the way the debate went. If a federal election campaign is just weeks away, how will that campaign be a much different test for Mark Carney compared to the campaign to be the new leader of the Liberal Party? Jordan, why don't you take that one?
Oh, this is going to be a fun one. I mean, the general campaign isn't going to be a coronation like this. This isn't your typical Liberal coronation. Despite the fact that Mark Carney has everything running in his favor, and despite the fact that he'll likely win handily on Sunday, he still stumbled many times during this campaign, many self-inflicted errors. And he's got a pass, and he's had nobody challenge him on it because the debates were rather stale. It was just everybody, as you said, Rob, on stage agreeing with each other. So the campaign is going to be very, very rocky for him. From day one when he comes out, if he still tries to dance around the financial disclosure issues, conflict of interest, he's going to find out pretty fast that he's not able to just walk away from it the way he has in the past. And the Conservatives and the media hopefully will be hammering him nonstop on these issues. So I do expect him to stumble quite a bit out of the gate, and I would expect some of these poll numbers to really start to soften for him once Canadians actually see him performing in prime time.
Okay, yeah, in a minute or less, Cam, and I'll let you continue after the break if you have more to say on this. But go ahead.
To be honest, I think it's going to be hard for him, but it's going to be hard for everybody for the very simple fact that you try to give me a message or an issue that's going to start off the campaign as the ballot question, and then 6 weeks later it's still going to be it. We were just talking about how quickly things are moving, how fast things are changing. Think of the number of things that can come up in the middle of the campaign that throws it all into chaos. We've got 4 of those a week right now, and I think to me that's going to be hard for everybody across the board. So it may level things out. It's going to be hard for Mr. Carney, but also, you know what? Pivoting's proved to be pretty hard for Mr. Poilievre too. So maybe it levels the playing field a bit in that way.
Okay, interesting. When we come back, we're going to play a little bit of tape from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's news conference yesterday and ask if she owed an apology. Jordan Paquette here from Blue Sky Strategy Group. Cam Holmstrom with us as well. It's our Newsday panel. I'm Rob Snow. I want to talk a little bit about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. She made some remarks yesterday. She was in Medicine Hat about tariffs and Trump. Obviously unhappy with the current situation, feeling betrayed. This is a little bit of Premier Smith yesterday.
Let there be no mistake. As independent as we are, Albertans are strong and loyal Canadians. Thousands of Albertans have lost their lives fighting alongside our fellow Canadians to secure and protect our freedoms and our country. And we will not cast those freedoms and loyalties aside in response to the threat of economic pressure from a foreign government, even an historically friendly one. Albertans will decide our own destiny, free of coercion from any government. So today I'm announcing the following measures in response to the actions of the U.S. President. First, I've directed my cabinet to alter our procurement practices.
And then, like other premiers went on to outline, this is what I'm doing, liquor office store show, all of this kind of stuff, but very similar in tone to other premiers. Now, you think back a month ago, 6 weeks ago, there were politicians in Ottawa, there were political commentators, there were columnists in newspapers saying she's not on Team Canada, she's not a loyal Canadian, and worse, she's a traitor. And I just wonder now if some people, like Justin Trudeau, for example, owe Danielle Smith an apology for questioning her loyalty to Canada. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think she'll ever get an apology from some of these people. But look, Danielle Smith was always standing up for the people of Alberta, which was her job. And she's been doing this in the face of a federal government who's been trying to completely dismantle the livelihoods of Albertans for the last number of years via anti-energy policies. Danielle Smith actually, and she was criticized for this too, she went down to Mar-a-Lago. She went to the inauguration. She tried to meet with cabinet members, tried to do things. She went on American TV like other premiers are doing. And she just faced nothing but criticism for it. And I think that just had more to do with her politics than anything else. But it turns out at the end of the day, she is very much on Team Canada. And is willing to exert the pressures that Alberta has, and they do have a lot more leverage over the Americans than other provinces might. So yeah, I think it is time that people perhaps treat her with a little more respect that she would deserve.
A little more respect, okay, but probably no apology forthcoming. Fair enough.
There'll be no apology.
Cam, we only have a minute left. Cam. So final word to you today.
I'm sorry, but that call for respect rings about as hollow as Donald Trump's demanded respect from Volodymyr Zelensky. And I only say that because Danielle Smith I'm dead serious. Danielle Smith didn't just go out there and try to undermine things. She wasn't willing to put it all on the table when everyone else was. And that's a policy choice, fine. I understand where she's coming from. But she spent literally in the first month, she spent far more time attacking Ottawa than she had anything negative to say about Trump. and it was out there. She didn't modulate. Now, she did now. What she said yesterday was great. I hold her up for it. That's great. Even Jason Kenney was saying Danielle Smith was offside. So I'm glad she corrected herself. It's good on her part. But the point is, I'm personally not going to apologize to her. I mean, I never called her a traitor or anything like that. But I didn't. But my point is, I don't think she was doing an apology because she made a choice to go about it a certain way. And there's a consequence that comes with that. I'm glad she's fully on board right now. Well, no, she still is saying the same thing about the using of oil as a queen in this argument.
An export tax. Yeah, they're never going to accept an export tax. Yeah.
No, but my point is, it comes across far differently the way she did this time. If she had done that from the start, I think she would have been in a better position.
All right. Okay. Hey, great to hear from you. Enjoy the show on Sunday, the Liberal leadership race. I know you're all setting your PVRs for that one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Cam Holmstrom from Nipaway Strategies from Blue Sky Strategy Group. Jordan Piquette, our Newsday panelists today. Talkback. Coming up on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today's topic is service. Service to the country. Service to Canada. Mandatory service. We talked about this many months ago. We felt it was worth another conversation given everything that's going on. Here's a question for you. What do you think about the idea of instituting some form of national mandatory service in this country? Not necessarily conscription, but conscription if necessary is an old phrase that comes to mind. Now, the reason that we want to talk about this today at 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577, is because there seems to be a lot of, newfound love for Canada, newfound patriotism in this country, a lot of pride being expressed in Canada. A lot of people expressing that in various ways, how much they love their country, how much they love being Canadian, and how they never want to be part of the United States. There's a new nationalism on the rise. So we want to know, do you think that should extend to service? Canadians serving the country in one form or another. What do you think of that idea? What do you think of that idea? Now, in the recent past, the case for bringing in some kind of mandatory service in this country, especially for young people, it kind of goes like this. Canada is a big country, geographically, and Canada is a very diverse country. And many young Canadians do not feel a great attachment to Canada. And having Canadians, younger Canadians, participate in some kind of national service, it would instill in them a sense of common values or common purpose. It would provide an opportunity to infuse young people with a sense of Canadian identity, Canadian purpose, Canadian character. When this topic has come up in the past, it's also been argued that it'd be a good opportunity to teach people, especially younger Canadians, valuable and lifelong skills, whether that's teamwork or problem solving or discipline or leadership or charity. And that can only be of value to Canadians and Canada as a whole in the future. And as well, it's also been argued it would be good for our national security. That perhaps it could bolster recruitment into the Canadian Armed Forces, which has not been going well. That it could be of benefit to Canada in times of crisis, whether that's a natural disaster like a flood or a tornado or a wildfire. And it would infuse in younger Canadians a sense of community, and it would foster civic engagement. That's the case is usually made. And now I see this is coming up again, mostly on social media. None of the political parties, none of the political leaders are promoting this in any way, even with a possible federal election campaign just weeks away. But it is coming up again on social media because of the threat from the Trump administration in the United States. And the conversation there revolves more around some form of mandatory military service. A requirement that every Canadian of a certain age learn some basic military skills, whether that's outdoor survival skills, first aid, and yes, how to handle a firearm. We're throwing it out there because it's already out there. That Canadian civilians should learn how to defend themselves in their country because the world around us is growing increasingly hostile. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it today, the Coles Notes of it, if you will, mandatory service to Canada. What do you think of that idea? Do you think that's an idea that has some merit, worth exploring? And if it is worth exploring, what should it look like? What should mandatory service to Canada look like? Countries all over the world do this already. Especially mandatory military service. They do that in Finland. So does Norway. So does Sweden. It's a recent thing in Sweden. They also have it in Switzerland. But dozens of countries all over the world. What do you think about having a similar thing here? Say young people, 18 years old, being required to do some service to Canada, maybe even basic military training. You know, there was an election recently in the United Kingdom won by the Labour Party. The Conservative Party at that time floated this idea of mandatory national service, but it wasn't just military service. Could have been military service, but the plan would also have allowed young people to volunteer for charities or community groups. Would have been their choice. That plan didn't go anywhere because the Conservatives lost the election. Interesting idea, nonetheless. In the province of Ontario, there is a form of this. High school students have to complete 40 hours of what's known as community involvement activities in order to graduate from high school. That could be anything from helping out in a place of worship or helping to fundraise for a charity, participating in a community cleanup project, volunteering to help seniors, volunteering at a hospital, all kinds of things. And if they don't do it, they don't graduate. But the thinking goes, it would be good for the country. It would be good for the community. And it would be good for young people because it would expose them to people from all kinds of backgrounds. It would give them skills that can only be beneficial as they grow older. I'd really love to kick this around for a couple of hours. What do you think about it? Mandatory service. Maybe it looks like basic military training. Maybe it looks like charitable work or some kind of other service to support civil society. Do you think that's an idea worth exploring? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. That's our call-in line for Talkback. And if you've never called before, make today. Just mention it to our call screener that you're a first-time caller, and we'll make your call a priority. It's Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Our topic of the day is mandatory service. What do you think of the idea of requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service to their communities? Maybe it's basic military training. Maybe it's doing volunteer work with a community group or some other civic-minded organization. Is it something that you think is worth exploring? 1-833-668-2577. Steve is in Calgary up first. Thanks for calling. Steve, you're on the air. What do you think about this idea?
You know, China has been on a war footing for about 5 years now.
Okay. Steve, are you with me, Steve?
Oh, I thought you were talking to somebody else. So I stopped talking. In China, they are all trained in school on small firearms and civil defense. And I remember in the 1950s, I wasn't born yet, they had national defense programs in the actual schools. We don't do that anymore. But the bottom line is we could be in better shape as a nation, and
it only takes 1 to 3 months to train infantry. And that's really what you're looking at. That you can't train Air Force and Navy in 1 to 3 months.
Sure. And I'm not talking just exclusively about, say basic military training. I'm also talking about, as I said, volunteer work or, working with charities or, as I say, civic organizations or something like that. And not necessarily just basic military training. But you think the idea is worth exploring for young people?
Well, I know this much. I think one of the best programs I'd ever seen in my lifetime was called the Peace Corps, which was set up by Jack Kennedy. But you don't necessarily have to do it just in Canada. There's many places in the world they could travel to and see, you know what, we have it pretty good here. And I think if more Canadians got out and saw how the rest of the world is dealing with problems, that has some benefit there. The one thing we haven't brought up is how would that be financed? I don't know, because I know in the United States, if you're in the National Guard or whatever, your employer pays your wages.
Okay. Well, details to be worked out. Yeah. Right.
So before you can do anything, you got to figure out the financing first. But if you like the idea, I've always thought the Peace Corps was a good idea. Anyways,
okay. All right, Steve, thank you. Good to hear from you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing them. In Sylvan Lake today, Rod. Hi, Rod. You're on the air. Hi, Rod. I hear Rod somewhere. Hello, Rod.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Rod. Yes. What do you think of the idea of mandatory service?
I don't think it's a bad idea. But like the military, and this is the one, I have a nephew that went in as an automotive guy, and I have my best friend's son went in as a welder. But they quit because they discovered that the trades that they're in are not recognized, period. Not one day of the time they put in is recognized by the journeyman program. So you're wasting your life going in there. Why don't they, put the military should have it fixed so that they get some time in grade for that.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, if you go into, you're saying if you go into the armed forces as a tradesperson, an apprentice tradesperson, it doesn't count toward journeyman certification. Is that what you're saying?
Not a nickel. It used to. It doesn't anymore.
It didn't. Well, that's strange. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I was
but this idea
myself because I'm a trades guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe that should be straightened out. Maybe that's something political leadership should look at.
Anybody to go in.
Well, they're having a heck of a time trying to recruit people, and even when people express an interest in, especially even when people express an interest to enlist, it takes months and months and months of finding out. Really should do something to fast track that. But on the idea of mandatory service, this idea giving young people an opportunity, whether that's basic military training or doing volunteer work with the community, giving them kind of a sense of purpose that they're serving their country. They're serving their country.
I'm an employer, or was an employer, and there's all kinds of stuff. There's firefighting. There's cleanup. There's we used to hire lots of them in the summer, and then we had them trained when they got out of high school to come to work for us.
Excellent ideas. Yeah, excellent ideas. I skills for the future. Yeah. All right. And I'm glad to hear that, Rod.
Hey,
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rod.
Bye.
Thanks for the call, and thank you for that information. I didn't know that about apprenticeships if people are in the Canadian Armed Forces. Maybe somebody can fact check that. I don't know. We'll be right back. It's Talkback. We are well underway now. Mandatory service, our topic of the day, and the idea of requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service in service of the country.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What do you think about the idea of requiring young people in this country to participate in some form of mandatory service to the country, to their communities? Patrick is in Kitchener. Thanks for calling, Patrick. You're on the air. Hi, Patrick. What do you think of this idea?
Actually, I believe it's kind of already been done, specifically in 1857, called the Voluntary Enfranchisement and Gradual Civilization Act. I'm Indigenous. I'm a victim of the day schools, and according to the Enfranchisement Act of the Indian Act, we were not considered citizens, until we either got a diploma, got a job, went to or was ordained, or military service. Upon return or completion is when we got the right to vote, and we're officially Canadian citizens at the expense of our heritage and our status.
I didn't know anything about that. Wow, that's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the Voluntary Gradual Civilization Act of 1857 is when it was in. It wasn't, the enfranchisement part of the Indian Act wasn't gone until 1987. So we're still, like in my case, I'm still trying to reclaim my status. My brother and I were taken and separated as children from our parents, and brought into the day school system.
Okay. I didn't know that history. That's very interesting. That history, and that's not really what we're talking about. Mandatory service in order to be able to vote or anything like that, right?
But that's the thing, though. Indigenous were not considered Canadians until they did one of these things. So essentially, it's obviously not as harsh, possibly, but essentially it's the same thing. And don't get me wrong. I encourage my kids they did cadets, and it did wonders for them. But if you're making it mandatory, these were mandatory things for Indigenous people, and
so you hear that mandatory, and you're automatically like red flag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. Okay.
As I said, like my brother and I,
because of the history of it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I will not discount that. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Let's go to Timothy in Calgary. Timothy's calling from Calgary. Hi, Timothy. You're on the air. Go ahead, Timothy.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I guess the long and short, my answer is yes. I would support such a program. And more than just a few dozen. I'm originally from Nigeria. In Nigeria, we have something called the National Youth Service Corps, which is when you're done university, 4 years, you go for 1 year of service. It's like a paramilitary training, The way it's legislated is different because it's kind of a money grab. But the point is, it would be good if, children have an opportunity such as that here in Canada, because it will foster a sense of national pride. Like you said, a lot of younger generation don't even feel a sense of pride in their country, So, no, I think it would be a great idea. Yeah.
Okay. When you say it's kind of a money grab, what do you mean by that?
Well, no, in my country, no, that's in Nigeria. The way it's administered, some people on top are just, they are taking advantage of the young graduates. No, not in Canada. Canada, it will be administered differently. Yeah, and I think there's something in Canada called the cadets program. But it's not mandatory.
Yeah, there's cadets. I was in cadets as a young person.
It would be a great idea to mandate it, because, like you said, it will foster a sense of unity, team building, skill training. Too bad from what the previous class said. They don't, some of those programs don't translate to apprenticeship, but I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Timothy. Yeah. Interesting take there, sir. Appreciate it. See, there you go. With Timothy, they do it in lots of countries. Something like 80 countries have some kind of mandatory service. Thank you for your call. Okay. The latest breaking news is coming up next. Why don't you join the discussion on our topic today? Mandatory service. The idea of requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service. Maybe it's military service, maybe it's volunteer work with a community group or another civic-minded organization. Would that be good for the country? Is it an idea worth exploring? There isn't a politician pitching it, but we kind of are. 1-833-668-2577. More of your calls after the news on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello,
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Mandatory service. What do you think about the idea of requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service to the country, whether that's basic military training or volunteering with a community organization? Do you think that's a good idea? Is it worth exploring? I'd like to know your thoughts on that, please. Let's get to Chris is on the line in Calgary. Hello, Chris. Hi, Chris. Hi, Chris. Are you there?
Hey, Rob. How's it going, buddy?
I'm fine. Chris, thanks for calling. What do you think of this idea?
Well, I think it's a silly idea right now. Give it time and
silly
maybe.
Idea. Okay.
But I mean, you look at our current government and trying to disarm its citizens by banning all these different guns that are being used for sport shooting and hunting and whatever else. That's one notch against doing mandatory service, because I mean, what's the point in training everybody if they can't practice it, right?
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah.
And then the second part of this is that our military, as good as they are woefully under-equipped. I mean, we're still using technology from the 70s and 80s in our military with small pockets of equipment and technology that are, from the late 90s, early 2000s. So asking any reservist group to defend Canada without being able to practice their trade, without having good equipment, is just asking them to stand in front of a firing squad. So, no, I don't support doing mandatory service as it stands right now, until our government starts putting.
So, what would need to change then, Chris? What would need to change? Massive investments in the regular forces, by the sounds of it, right? Okay,
that's the first thing,
and maybe a change of thinking when it comes to firearms ownership would be another.
Well, yes, but I'm willing to forgo that by first investing in the military and getting the proper equipment that our people would need to be able to defend our country. Because without that, again, we're just going to get run over. Like, let's say that Trump decided to get real crazy and just invade Canada. All right, we would be the 51st state by dinner time. Right? I wouldn't expect anybody to stand in front of any of their forces to try to stop it, because it's just suicide.
It's a frightening prospect, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's a very frightening prospect. So any other country that wanted to do it, like say the UK or who knows, country GYV, they'd have it tomorrow by dinner time. So until we can defend ourselves, asking for people to stand up to try and defend it is pointless. So we need to have that investment in our military. Once that happens, you're going to have people naturally signing up for our armed forces because they feel like they're being supported, right? Because without that support, nobody wants to be there.
All right. Great points, Chris. Thank you. Appreciate the perspective. Buddy. Yeah. All the best to you. In Rocky View County, Alberta. Graham, you're on the air. Hi, Graham.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, Graham. What do you think of this idea? Mandatory service for young people. Serve the country.
I think there should be mandatory service. When I was between grade 11 and grade 12, this is 1977-78, the Canadian Navy offered a summer boot camp. And so some of my friends talked me into going with them. And it was great. We learned survival skills. They took us up to Caroline and dumped us in the middle of the woods for 3 days. We had to survive by ourselves. We learned hunting skills. We learned how to shoot guns, discipline. It was a great thing. And then we had to sign up for 5 years reserve, but we didn't have to serve. That was just in case a war broke out, then we were called to serve. And they paid us for that summer program. It was just a great experience. And I think, I think a lot of young
How long ago would that have been, if you don't mind me asking?
Between 1977 and 1978.
Wow. Okay. Long time ago.
Yeah.
Long time ago. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was good. I mean, and the very first day, we had all the stuff on, and they had us back then it was miles. Had us run a mile, and everybody's puffed out. But after 7 weeks of running, we could run 5 miles. And we learned Taekwondo, hand-to-hand combat. things like that. And, shooting guns. I mean, I was brought up on a farm, and I live on a farm now, and it's a kind of a daily thing with us out here with my boys and stuff. But I think it's good for city kids and, men, women to learn these things.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. I'm learning a lot as we make our way through the first hour of Talkback today. Graham, thank you for your perspective. To Wayne in Halifax, you're on the air, Wayne. What do you think of this idea of mandatory service of some form or another? What do you think of it? Hi, Wayne.
Who are you talking? Are you talking to me?
I
Wayne?
am. Yeah. Is your name Wayne? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, just to let you know, I'll give you a little bit of history about myself first. I did the cadet program in the early 70s, and then I went into the Naval Reserves, 78, and then in 84 I went regular Navy, and I agree with it, but then I also disagree with it, because when I went down to the recruiter couldn't pull the wool over my eyes and said, "Oh, you're going infantry." I said, "Like hell I am. I'm going Navy," because that's where I was trained. I was a Sea Cadet. I was in the Naval Reserve, and I wanted to go regular Navy. But the way I look at it is there are combatants, and then there are people that are not combatants. And what I mean by that is if you do a forced military or a draft, whatever you want to call it, I think if you're not a combatant, if you tick off you're not a combatant and you just want to be a guy that works on the base as a non-combatant trade, like armored and all that crap, or you don't want to be out to sea getting picked off by whatever goes on at sea, then you should be given a job. Like I met a gentleman that his health wasn't good enough to go overseas, and he told me that he didn't consider himself a veteran because he only served in all the different batteries around Halifax during the Second World War. Well, to me, he's still a veteran. So I think they should have a program, yes. But if you're not a combatant, there's other jobs they can get you to do.
Sure. Okay.
That's my
but generally speaking, like picture an 18-year-old and it's mandatory they do something to serve the country. Maybe it's military, maybe it's not related to military at all. Maybe it's for the next year, 1 day a week you go and you're volunteering at this guest home or seniors home or whatever.
I think Canada should bring the reserve force, Army, Navy, and Air Force, up to 1 million man strong, men and women. I shouldn't just say men.
Sure.
I think it should be. I think it should be mandatory, and they're in the reserves. They should do a 5-year program in the reserves, and that'll get them ready for anything that's coming down the road.
Okay. All right, Wayne. Thank you for your call. Good to hear from you today in Halifax. Cheers to you as well. We'll be right back with more of your calls on this idea, mandatory service.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
One line available there if you want to grab it at 1-833-668-2577. Lots of time to fit you in. The wait won't be too long. Mandatory service is what we're talking about. This idea of requiring young people to participate in some form of service to the country, but maybe that's basic military training. Maybe it's volunteer work with a community group. I just want to know your level of interest in it. Kevin up next in Halifax. Hi, Kevin. You're on the air, Kevin. Good day.
How you doing today, Rob?
I'm good, Kevin. What do you think of this idea?
I think it's a great idea. Just a little bit of history. Back in the early 80s, the Canadian Armed Forces had a program in which I was a part of. It was called YTEP, Youth Employment Training Program, where when you got out of school, you could go into the military. You signed up for a year. You got basic training, and then you got trades training. And, for me, it was an eye-opener. In a good way. And I think, I'm 60 years old now, but most of the good things and jobs and things that I've had in my life, I can link back to that early experience that I had. So I'm thinking it doesn't have to be military. There's a lot of communities out there. They got volunteer fire departments. They're crying for people right now. Maybe you put in a year dedicating yourself to the community volunteer fire department or whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I think it's a great idea. It's good for the country. It's good for the community. It's also really good for the individual.
Okay. What did you get from it in your experience?
Well, I got paramilitary training. You know, early in my life, I wasn't on a really good track, and I went in the military. I learned how to listen. I learned how to take orders. You know, I learned how to respect other people because, as you can imagine, when you're with a military unit, you're with a lot of people that don't look like you, and you have to get along, and you learn to respect them, and you learn to talk to them. You know, you grow as a person. So, you know, it was a growth time for me, and it was a very, very positive experience that I got. You start feeling good about yourself too. You know, so when you get out and you apply for jobs, you feel pretty confident. You feel that you actually have something to give because they instilled that in us. You know, you're
Do you feel
somebody.
do you feel that the experience that you gained from a program like that was valued by a future employer? Is it something that they valued, do you think?
Every job I had and I've been very successful in my life, and I've always used that on my resume. And every interview, every job that I've applied for, it was always looked at in a positive way. It got me to where I am before I retired.
It opened doors for you?
Oh, I
opened
guess
doors
it
for
did
you?
open doors. Definitely opened doors, for sure.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
very interesting.
So
Thank you.
I would love to see something like that. You know, again, Rob, you know, it would be great for, I have grandkids now, and I think it'd be great for them to get that experience. You know, it's only a year of your life, and you help your community, you help your country, but you do really help yourself as well.
Well, very well said. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. To Steve in Cambridge, Ontario. Steve, you're up next in Cambridge, Ontario. We're talking about mandatory service today. What do you think about this idea, Steve?
I'm going to try to make it relatively short, concise. Number one, it's going to take an awful lot from the government and from the people. I'll just go for the people. There's 18-year-olds to 34-year-olds. These are the people that were less likely to vote in Ontario. And that's the people you want, number one. Number two, the government and the military has to get together. And if they have to have guns, then you have to have people that know how to run guns, how to operate them. Because the old guns that we have, people don't know. And there's also a lot of training, which is rigorous. A lot of people have to be whatever. Now, the last caller that you had was a very, very important part. In the United States of America, you have any military group, you have trades, whether it's an electrician, whether it's a welder, whether it's a tech person. Now, airplane people, what do? They fly commercial jets. They got a job. And as soon as they see that you were in the military, and a lot of these people hardly ever picked up a gun. They went in the military in order to pick up money from the military and an education. And that's exactly what they got. They also got camaraderie. They got regimentation. They know, like the other person said, they know doesn't matter what color you are, what shape you are, you're a person, and that's all there is to it. And you got to be side by side with them. And he's absolutely right. The people that were in Canada or the United States, if they were on their resume, if they wrote in that they were in the military or did something, that will definitely catapult them to something else. I think that's about it.
All right. So you think it has some merit, maybe worth exploring as an idea?
I think it has a great amount of merit. Maybe you'll get 50% of the people or the young people off their phone for a while.
Okay, very interesting. Maybe
don't fight with
we
me
could
now.
only
don't fight
hope,
with
Steve.
me now. I'm on the phone. It's okay. Pardon me?
Yeah, okay, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. All right.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Mandatory service, our topic for the day. What do you think about the idea of requiring young people to participate in some sort of service to the country, military or otherwise? Dallas is in Cambridge today. Hi, Dallas.
How you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, Dallas. What do you think of this idea?
I think it's a wonderful idea.
You do? Why is that?
Well, you know, I agree with every one of your last callers, and they took pretty much every one of my points I had and put them to point. As far as the military thing and such, well, I agree with you, Mr. Snow, that there is countless other places out there where we could be sending the kids for a couple of weeks. I know in Ontario it's 40 hours or something that everyone has to do.
40 hours, yeah.
40 hours to graduate. Well, I think it certainly should be a little more extensive than that.
Right.
A few months at least, 3-4 months. You go and you do this every day, and it does create discipline. There's no doubt about that. And ultimately, I don't know if many of your callers will disagree, but we clearly have, in my opinion, a problem with the discipline with our adolescents these days. So, they can kind of do whatever they want. That was certainly, as far as I'm concerned, put something different in their head.
All right, Dallas, good points all around. Thank you so much from Dallas to JD out in Calgary today. Hi, JD. What do you think of the idea?
I'm got a couple of thoughts. Back when I was a teenager, there was a program called Katimavik. And basically it was 3 times 3 months, and you could choose to make one of those a military period. Hearkening back to what a couple of previous callers mentioned, one, yes, we need better investment in our military before something like this could serve the country long term. And as another gentleman mentioned, not everyone has the mindset to be in the combat arms. So my thought would be something like Katimavik, except you do the 3-month basic training, you do the 3 months getting some sort of trade experience, whether it's hands-on or brain work, and then you spend either 6 months in one location or, like Katimavik, 2 3-month periods somewhere in Canada working on community service, infrastructure, what have you. Now, wouldn't be a cheap program because Katimavik covered your equipment, your clothing, your food, you got a stipend, housing, and everything like that. But people came out of Katimavik with a whole lot of skills and having helped with community infrastructure all over the country.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Katimavik. First I ever heard of it was when Justin Trudeau was the chair of the board of directors for Katimavik. I remember that. Okay, thank you for your call, JD. Be right back. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. We've been talking about the idea of mandatory service to the country. Mandatory. What do you think about the idea? Requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service. Maybe that's a stint in the military, basic military training. Maybe it's doing volunteer work with a community organization. Do you think that's something that's worth exploring? Do you think it would be good for the country, good for the people involved? 1-833-668-2577. Let's get right back to our phone calls. Janet in Alberta. Thanks for waiting, Janet. You're on the air. What do you think of this idea, Janet?
Hi. Well, I don't think it would work if it was mandatory. Our youth are not disciplined enough to go into that. There'd be so many protests and riots and everything else if people were forced to do it. But we should build some sort of incentives for them to want to go into the military and get training for certain services or trades. I mean, military is not just guns and tanks and stuff. There's people that have to learn to do the cooking and the housekeeping. They have to do all that stuff as well, and medical and teaching and stuff. There's so many different things that could be after they're out. They could go into those things, and it would be all paid for because they've done their service. So it's more like a training school more than a military school.
Okay, but you don't think it would work if it was mandatory. So you would like to see maybe incentivize people. What kind of what would be a good incentive to do it, do you think? What incentives could be provided?
Fully paid for. And priority for jobs that are out there.
Priority
and of course,
for jobs,
high-tech jobs. They need lots of that. And a lot of the youth today, they get out of school and they have nothing to do. I live in a small town, and they all have to move out of a small town to get, work or education, and people can't afford that always. So, it would be a place for them to live and get trained and do something good for their country at the same time. But they'd have to have some kind of incentive where they're getting paid to do this. It'd be paid volunteerism. But, firefighting is another one. When they're in armed services, sometimes they get called up to help with floods and fires and stuff. Well, they
sure, all kinds of natural disasters, yeah.
Yeah, they have to learn how to drive heavy equipment, and then they come out, now they've got a skill, and they can go into that, or, driving big trucks or whatever, transport trucks.
Right.
So there's a lot of other advantages for being in the military, not just shooting and tanks, and airplanes.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah.
A lot of mechanical
all very interesting
things.
Points that you raised today, Janet. I really appreciate you giving us some thought and giving us a call today. Thank you so much. Let's go to Joanne is up next, also in Alberta today. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Joanne. What do you think of this idea?
What do I think about this idea? I think that 18 is way too old for them to go ahead and start volunteering in the community. Absolutely. I think that our youth need to be involved. I think that that's what is missing. Our crime rates are going up because, many youths just don't have a good example. And I think that starting a mandatory program through school, whether it be, I don't know, helping out at a seniors lodge, or I could sit down and make a plan of it. I don't think that it's necessarily as easy as throwing ideas out there. I think there are many. And I think that the military aspect of things is just one part of it. I feel that in our Western society, we have lost the component of giving back. I don't know how many youth I have met and whatnot, and they're willing to help out for money instead of just willing to help out. Just willing to help out your neighbor and shovel the sidewalk. You don't have to get paid for it. You're just being kind and expressing that. I feel that mandatory through our school programs, maybe it's after school. You have to give, an hour and a half after school or 2 hours, whatever it is, in order to give back to community. And I think Ontario is definitely on the right track. I did have the opportunity to travel to Sweden for World Juniors many years ago. And all of the volunteers at the arena were students between the ages of 13 and 18 who were volunteering. They were pleasant. They were polite. They were kind. They were helpful. They wore a smile. It wasn't I guess I have to do this attitude. It was a very pleasant experience. And I do like that positive encouragement for community and which enriches our country.
But you think 18 years old is too old, and it should start earlier?
I do. I do think that it should start earlier. I think that, so start in small increments. And or what have you. I mean, everybody's
so let me run this by you. For example, in France, just a few years ago, the government, Macron is the president there, introduced a mandatory service program in 2021, saying he wanted young people to develop their role in society and promote social cohesion. And that starts at 15.
Yeah.
And it's a 12-day residential stay with some organization. You do 84 hours of volunteer work at some kind of local authority or public establishments in France, starting at 15.
I think that's a great concept. However, I do think that 15 is too late. Ironically, I just spent a year in France as a grand au pair, and two of the family members that I was looking after, they were of the age of 13 and 16, and they needed to be involved in this type of a program where giving back is essential a lot earlier. And I just feel that if we give young people the opportunity to do good as early as possible in life, maybe they don't have a good role model at home, but I feel that we should be the example and set the example for the future of our country and its people. And I think that the sooner we start that, the better base they will have. They might think twice about, egging your house at Halloween or whatnot if they have that good, you know what I mean?
Thing.
Instead of being out.
Yeah. Idle hands do the devil's work, Joanne. Okay, that's our time. We've got to run.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So we've been kicking around this idea today, mandatory service, the idea of requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service to their community, to their country. Tom in Cambridge is up next. Hi, Tom.
How you doing?
I'm good, Tom. Thank you. What do you think?
Well, I think I'd like to take a little step further, but I can remember growing up, there was little organizations called Little Beavers, and you had your Navy League cadets, you had your airborne cadets, you had all these organizations to go into that. Coaching hockey, when I got to a certain level of coaching midgets and AAA juveniles and that, I actually got them involved in helping teach the young novice tyke players how to skate, shooting, and those type of skills and that. So I was getting them involved to realize that you're paying it forward, for a lack of a better term, but that's what they were doing. But with today, I'd like to see, like, over in Europe, there's a mandatory age limit that once you graduate from school or college, you're spending so many years in the military. And I think that's when we have
in some countries, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, but today we have a lot of kids who don't like going to school or don't want to go to school. We have a lot of people who are youth unemployed, and there's eventually, this is where it's like, if you don't want to go to school, you don't want to get a job, you're going to the military. Like they're going to have a roof over their head. They're going to learn some things about themselves, and the trade aspect and earning a trade and earning a living. And learning how to, camaraderie and what it really takes to be involved in the world today and how to communicate. And that I think the military is a side where they should be going to schools nowadays and promoting themselves in the different branches of the military. And, don't sell the dream of you're going to go around and see the world, because majority of the time you're not seeing the world. You're going to be on a base somewhere. If you're fortunate to be overseas, you're going to a base for a while. You're traveling around. But the fact is, you can come out of it after 5 years with an education, a degree in something, and a skill, and not where you are today.
All right, Tom. Great points all around. Thank you for your call. Mike in Kincardine up next. Hello, Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good, Mike. What do you think of this idea?
Well, I'll tell you my experience. I first started out in the Air Cadets, right? I got my pilot's license, right? And when I went in late 1970s and early 1980s to university, I had my university education paid for by going through the regular officers training program. Now, Rob, the big problem here is that 4 or 5 years into it, when it comes time for a young officer to re-enlist back then, the private sector paid way more than the military did. So if you're going to keep the people, you have to offer comparable pay, because most people, 5 years after they're commissioned, they start to get married. They start to have families. And back then, the housing for military families was let's just say, less than desirable. So,
right.
Yeah,
I don't think much has changed on that front.
Yes. So,
Mike, right? Yeah.
It is a lifestyle that your spouse has to agree to because you're moving around a lot. And your kids are moving around a lot too. So a lot of people get out of there after 4 or 5 years after doing their commitment because, one, the pay, and two, the lifestyle of being flung around all over the place. And that's been my experience, Rob.
Okay, I thank you for your call today. A good insight for you to share with our listeners there, Mike. Charlie is in Grey Highlands. Hi, Charlie. Hi, Charlie. Are you there, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm there, Rob.
Yeah, hi
How
there.
you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Rob, we need a reserve army, okay? We have a reserve army now, but I think it's mostly like older guys that are into it. We need the young people getting into it. It's a fairly good reserve army we got in Canada. You check it up on the computer. I discussed this with our MPP, who is a retired colonel, and we talked about it on the radio and talked about it quite a bit. And it's a great thing. Now, myself, I was about 16, 17 years old. I quit school, didn't go to school. There was nothing there I was interested in anyway, but I got a bit of education. I got to keep me going anyway. So I got to do the Army had a course, 10-week course, went to Halifax, and it was a great thing because them days you get a bit of a chip on your shoulder. You're going to change the word. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Now, when you walk up to a guy and he's doing all the talking, you don't talk. He talks. He tells you what to do. You do it. If you do it wrong, you got to go again and do it right. If you got a chip on your shoulder, well, you got to go wash underneath an army truck with a hose. You can wash the mud off for 2 or 3 days. The training was great. I learned how to fire all kinds of rifles, tear down a 50 caliber, fire an FN. And when I come to Toronto, I got into Reserve Army at Fort York Armories, and I spent about a year there, but it was only like maybe 2 or 3 days a month or something, and we'd all go to Meaford. There's a tank range in Meaford where they train, and you couldn't fire a gun in Toronto. Well, you can today, but you're not in the Army, so you got your FN out, you got your target shooting, and your demolition stuff and everything, and
yeah,
and you really learned, eh?
Right. So do you think
really great for you because you come away
good
with
for
a
you?
different...
So do you think we should have something like that, like
we gotta have
18-year-olds
or for younger generation? I see them all around me here, and they're bored. They can't afford to get an old car or something like we used to do, and they got to get into something that gives them a meaning, a feeling.
Right. Gotcha. All right, Charlie. Good call. Good call, Charlie. Lots of funny lines from you today.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
In the home stretch here of Talkback on a Thursday, where we have been talking about the idea of mandatory service and whether you think this is a good idea. The idea of requiring people to participate in some form of mandatory service could be basic military training, could be doing volunteer work in the community. What do you think about the idea? We have 2 Andrews on the line. We'll take the one on line 1 first. Hello, Andrew. Are you with me?
I'm here, brother.
All right. Good to hear from you. What do you think about this idea?
Well, I think we might have said the wrong word here. Mandatory and participate. I think what you're saying is the government will force you to go do something you don't want to do. And I think we sussed this out about 100 years ago where that's not a good idea. America does not do it. That last caller, you just used Israel as a benchmark. Excuse me, is that how you see Israel in a positive light? Anyway, beyond that, it's not about...
Okay. Well, some people do.
Well, no, okay, fair enough. But the part of this shouldn't be, my friend's got a fancy car, and they had money when I was in high school. Listen, how does breaking down a 50 caliber gun help you? All of your callers have been boomers who can barely pronounce English words, and we're no better off.
Okay, there's no need to insult the other callers, Andrew. Thank you. I think I'll end our conversation there. Let's make it a respectful conversation. There's no need to badmouth other people here. Let's try the other Andrew, see if we have better luck. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Great.
What do you think of this idea?
On the surface, I think it's a fantastic idea. I've always been a fan, and I think mandatory military service was something to be advantageous to Canada. But what I like about your topic today is that you also encompass the possibility of other types of service, which I think, because there's so much emphasis on mental health these days, not everyone is geared for military service. So you've opened the door up to Parks Canada, the Trans-Canada Trail, Coastal Watch, or what have you. And I think that would be a great pocket for those people that just can't handle that type of military structure in their lives. So I think it's a fantastic idea. And I think what would really benefit not just the country, but each individual is that value back and forth, valuing the country they live in and the country valuing the individual as an individual and what they've done for the country, which I think we really need to build on as far as us as a country goes. So I'm all for it.
You're all for it. Okay. Yeah, thank you for your call. Really appreciate your call today. Andrew, number 2 in Calgary. Okay, some free lines available there. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Well, among the reasons, some people are talking about this again is because of the situation down south and a Trump administration that seems to be openly hostile to Canada, or an economic force against Canada, talking nonstop about wanting to make Canada the 51st state. So it has some people thinking, I admit to being one of them, what should we be doing in this country to prepare for this this new reality that we're in? How would we ever defend Canada if the Americans under Trump one day decided to take Canada by force? Right? I kind of laugh. Maybe I shouldn't laugh, but it has sparked this interest, for one, in training the civilian population in basic military operations. Here's how you follow orders. Here's how you work at a team. This is basic first aid. These are basic survival skills. And yes, this is how to handle a firearm. This is how you shoot a gun, whatever. And there are people on social media, David, I've seen the threads on Reddit and on Twitter, and maybe you've seen them too. Canadians need to learn this stuff. The enemy is out the gate. I don't know if the threat is that serious, but is it something worth exploring? And maybe, is it really such a bad idea if Canadians on a large scale learn these skills? Now, some of the callers have mentioned we've had a government in Ottawa that's been running around the country for the last 9 years that is probably not interested in having Canadians arm themselves in the name of, even if it's in the name of national defense, because the government that's been in power for the last 9 years in Ottawa has been more interested in restricting gun ownership than it has been in training Canadians how to actually use a firearm. But maybe now there is a case to be made that the world has changed. And that's one of the reasons why this idea of mandatory service, military or otherwise, is coming up in certain circles these days. And long before Donald Trump recaptured the White House, people were promoting this idea, something that would be good for Canada, would be good for the country. As I said off the top, people who are in favor of something like this, whether it's military or volunteerism, whatever, contributing to the country one way or the other, point to the need to improve social cohesion in this country. It's a country with a vast landmass, so many different cultures, languages, backgrounds, customs now, that something like this would provide Canadians with a unifying purpose, to be proud of the country. It would give people a common sense of Canadian identity. And as I said, they do this in countries all over the world, even in countries that would consider to be considered to be our peer countries. All the Scandinavian countries are doing it. In France, I mentioned mandatory service. They reinstituted that in 2021. They have varying forms of it. In the UK, when the Tories were running their campaign in that election. They promoted something like this. They didn't win the election, obviously, but it was aimed at young people, high school age. It could either be military service or work in civil society, volunteering and such. But it would have been mandatory. All kinds of ways to do such a thing. The question we have for you is, should we do such a thing? Have some kind of mandatory service, either military service or some sort of community service. Is that a good idea? 1-833-668-2577.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Allow me, if you will, a chance to pass along some new and breaking news with American officials announcing a pause on tariffs on Canada and Mexico USMCA trade until April 2nd. So earlier in the day, there was this April 2nd pause announced for Mexico. It did not mention Canada. The breaking news is that it will now include Canada. So that is just moving now. Just let me check. That's probably good for stocks, which have been deep in the red all day, but trying to mount a comeback. But if you think about a half an hour ago, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down almost 600 points, still down, but it is trying to pare some losses, trying to mount some kind of comeback right now, down about 420 points right now. Still a pretty steep loss for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, loss of about 1% on the day. The TSX main index is still deep in the red. It's a very tough day for the Canadian stock market, again down about 271 points. The dollar right now, Canadian dollar, trading at 69.89 cents US. It's kind of been up and down all day for a brief time today. A couple of hours ago, it was actually trading above 70 cents US. But again, according to reports, the Trump administration now delaying tariffs until April 2nd for both Canada and Mexico for everything that falls under CUSMA or the USMCA. That was the last free trade deal, of course, signed by Donald Trump himself. Now, here on Talkback, just a few minutes left. We've been talking about mandatory service. I've loved the conversation today. Lots of great history, lots of great ideas and points being made by our callers. What do you think about the idea? Mandatory service for young people, whether that's basic military training, whether it's volunteer work with the community group. It was great. Joel is in Calgary. Thanks for hanging in there, Joel.
Hey, how you doing today, Mr. Snow?
I'm good, Joel. Thank you. Fraud and abuse, really? Okay.
That idea, I don't know. I don't mind that idea one little bit. There's quite a few people that I work with. They're younger brothers, blah, blah, blah. They say, oh, they're just sitting in my parents' basement at home. They don't want to get a job. They just want to, just bum off their parents all the time. And I think, yeah, it'd be good to get these kids up and out and maybe give them a little bit of pride in their country, be a productive member of society.
Oh, yeah.
Give them maybe a little
lane
to shoot for the rest of their lives. They don't have to stay in military service, but they might figure something that they like, or maybe they want to be a corporal. Can't say, but yeah, I think it would be very good to try to give these kids that don't have any clue about where they want to go with their lives some form of direction.
Yeah. I think you've kind of nailed it there, Joel, and it's a great way to wrap up the show today. You've made the case. There are a lot of people who are young people, especially lacking direction and lacking an attachment to the country, and it's an idea that this would provide Canadians, especially younger Canadians, maybe a sense of common Canadian values, instill them or infuse people with a sense of Canadian identity and purpose and character, and teach them some valuable and lifelong skills, which would be good for them, and in the long run, I think good for the country as well.
Yeah, they could help out with just everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Productive.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. You're the last caller for today. Great discussion today. Really interesting. We kind of took a flyer on that. We didn't know if we would get a lot of response, but in the end, quite a popular topic. And maybe we'll talk about that sometime down the road. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Friday free-for-all Talkback. So we will follow your lead tomorrow. Maybe we'll talk about all the breaking news that has happened this week. And it's still early yet. The day is not done. Lots of breaking news to bring you up to date on. We'll do that next. Here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Mandatory service. What do you think about the idea? Requiring young people to participate in some form of mandatory service. Let's go to Grant in Listowel. Hi, Grant.
Hi.
Hi, Grant.
I totally agree with it as long as it's the basics.
Okay.
And I think that needs to be, well, I think you did explain that a little bit. But anyways, when I was 14 years old, I went to Camp Ipperwash on Lake Huron for 6 weeks, had a roof over my head, got some training, and discipline was the big thing. And that's what we don't have anymore. Our teachers are not allowed to discipline, dotty. And there will be some uproar. But having said that, I've said for years, if we had a different society, we would have a different society had it not had that carried on. And I'm a living proof of that. I spent 6 weeks up there, and I know the first 3 or 4 days to a week, there were guys there from the city, and they bawled like babies because of what they had to do. But there was no parents allowed to visit, anything else. At the end of 6 weeks, we got $150 for our time spent and what we learned. I was fortunate. I could hardly read and write, but I met a lad from Hillsburg who helped me out an awful lot, actually 2 of them down there. 20 years later, I'm married with 3 kids, and we're down in that area. So I searched out to see if anybody knew this family name, and give them my name and number, and asked them if they could pass it on. And this lad got back to me, and he was living in Saudi Arabia, and
wow.
he was teaching over there. And anyways, my son come in one day, or when I come home, he had brought the mail in, and there was this letter in the mail for me from Saudi Arabia, and he was so excited. He said to his mom, "Who in hell does your dad know that lives in Saudi Arabia?" Lottie. And she said, "I have no idea." He wrote me a 10-page letter of his life history from the time we left Camp Ipperwash until then, and he was teaching in Saudi Arabia and had been there for 4 or 5 years, and we're still friends.
Isn't that something? Well, isn't that amazing? All right, Grant, thank you so much. Good to hear from you today. Let's go to, in Cambridge, Ontario, Craig is on the line. Hello, Craig. Hi, Craig.
Hi, how are you? When I was in my early 20s, I traveled abroad a bit, and I got to meet a lot of people that actually did do military service. One fellow in particular was from Germany, and he just got out of the military. And I guess at that time, their rules were between the ages of 18 and 24, you had to do 1 year of military service. And he absolutely said, what's 1 year out of your life when you're that young? You can afford to do it. And it teaches these kids, I call them kids, responsibility, respect for their elders. I could go on and on and on. And I think it would really benefit people in today's society if we had that at a younger age. Maybe some of these people that are older now would not be in the situation they are if they had a bit more structure when they were younger and got to learn some value. And that's all I have to say about it. I'm definitely
okay. Definitely for it. Okay, thank you.